Hello, dear friends. When we talk about financial assets, we sometimes forget that the main asset that exists is not gold, but human potential, which is capable of overcoming all obstacles to seek its survival and that of its species, and also to be happy and spiritual. Such potential leads to self-realization and peak experiences. Opinion piece. Peak experiences. The term was coined by Abraham Maslow. It's a moment of maximum happiness and fulfillment. Others speak of theophany, epiphany, or enlightenment. Carl Gustav Jung called it a numinous experience. Its state of flow, one loses all sense of time. In a state of flow, one loses all sense of time. We all seek happiness and avoid suffering. The problem is that we don't always get the means right. Humanistic psychology works on self-realization. The plateau experience, calmer, is meditation. Aldous Huxley spoke of a universal perennial philosophy. William James studied the varieties of religious experience. Swami Vivekananda introduced universal spirituality to the West. He said that no one can be truly free until we are all free. The desire for personal salvation is contingent upon the salvation of others. Paramahansa Yogananda taught the necessity of direct experience. The movement of human potential seeks higher states of consciousness. Each religion provides its own partial interpretation of the universal truth. A new spirituality without dogmas is being born, very characteristic of the Aquarian age. Let's start. Everyone seeks it consciously or unconsciously, but no one knows what it is or exactly how to reach it. It is sought by licit means, such as sport, by illicit means, such as drugs, or by spiritual techniques, such as yoga or meditation. The paths are infinite, but the goal of every being is to seek happiness and avoid suffering. And in that we all agree, although some are not willing to pay the price to get there, because it requires an inner work. Sometimes it appears by surprise and vanishes quickly, because it likes to play hide and seek like children. According to Matteo Sol, there is a particular state of consciousness that can change your life forever. This sacred moment can be described as ecstatic, in the sense that your connection to life expands significantly. In this deep state of being, you feel that life is full of beauty and holiness. However, this feeling is not subjective, but is an objective phenomenon that is outside of your personal being. I once found a young man laughing with happiness, lying in the middle of the street as if he were a drunkard, because he couldn't stand up because of his happiness, and his joy was contagious. But he hadn't been drinking, but had found liberation, and probably had not read any books. Humanistic psychology calls it a summit experience or peak experience, but Carl Gustav Jung called it a numinous experience. Others speak of theophany or epiphany. A peak experience is an altered state of consciousness characterized by euphoria, often achieved by self-actualized human beings. It is a feeling of profound peace and joy, immense happiness, coherence, and an undisturbed inner harmony. But what matters above all is the endurance of a state of consciousness superior to what is commonly experienced. Description: the concept was originally developed by Abraham Maslow in 1964, who describes peak experiences as rare, thrilling, oceanic, deeply moving, exhilarating, and elevating experiences that generate an advanced way of perceiving reality and are even mystical and magical in their effect on the experiencer. There are several unique characteristics of a peak experience, but each element is perceived together in a holistic way that creates the moment of reaching peak potential. Peak experiences can range from simple activities to intense events. However, it's not necessarily about what the activity is, but the feeling of ecstasy and happiness experienced during it. Humanistic psychologists postulate that all people have an intense desire to fully realize their potential, to reach a level of self-actualization, to prove that human beings do not just react blindly to situations, but try to accomplish a greater task. Maslow mentally studied healthy individuals rather than people with serious psychological problems. This provided him with information for this theory, that people have peak experiences, sublime moments in life in which the individual is in harmony with himself and his environment. From Maslow's perspective, self-actualized people may have many peak experiences during the day, while others have such experiences less frequently. Humanistic psychology is the name given to a movement of official scientific psychology that emerged in the 20th century and developed mainly in the 50s and 60s. It was born in the United States with the launching of the Bugental Manifesto as a reaction to the more orthodox psychoanalysis and behaviorism that prevailed in psychotherapeutic practice at that time. Abraham Maslow. Peak experiences were originally described by psychologist Abraham Maslow as moments of maximum happiness and fulfillment. In his 1964 work, Religious Values and Peak Experiences, to some extent the term represents Maslow's attempt to name those experiences that have generally been identified as religious experiences and whose origins by implication have been considered supernatural. Maslow believed that the origin, core, and essence of all known high religion was the private, solitary, and personal enlightenment revelation or ecstasy at some highly sensitive prophet or seer. According to Maslow, the emotions often informed by a peak experience include awe, reverence, humility, surrender, and even adoration at the greatness of the experience, and really is perceived with truth, goodness, beauty, fullness, vitality, uniqueness, perfection, justice, simplicity, richness, effortlessness, joy, self-sufficiency. A state of flow. In positive psychology, a flow state, also known colloquially as being in the zone, is the state of mind in which a person engaged in some activity is completely immersed in a feeling of energized concentration, total involvement and enjoyment in the process of the activity. In essence, flow is characterized by complete absorption in what one is doing and a resulting transformation in the sense of time. In yogic tradition, such as Raja Yoga, a state of flow is referred to in the practice of Samyana, which is well explained by Professor Ramiro Calle, a mental absorption in the object of meditation. The Chinese mystics call Wu Wei the state of flow with the Tao. Self-realization is a concept developed by Abraham Maslow that is characterized by becoming all that you want and can be maximizing your potential. A common phenomenon experienced by many self-actualized people is called flow. Flow has been described as a state of mind when one is utilizing one's full potential, completely immersed in one's current activity and therefore not conscious of time or anything else. Self-realized people often experience flow as well as peak experiences. Abraham Maslow considers the peak experience to be one of the most important goals in life, as it is an implication of self-realization. This moment of feeling the true self fully and completely makes the peak experience an essential component of identity. The aftermath of the peak experience causes the individual to see himself and the world in a new way. He sees himself in the most positive light, see life as valuable and meaningful, and most importantly, seeks to repeat the experience. The peak experience is an exhibition of Maslow's emphasis on the pursuit of positive growth, maximizing potential as the true goal of human existence. Meditation. Maslow also recognized a phenomenon related but distinct from the typical plateau experience of meditation. He wrote, "This is serene and calm rather than moving, emotional, climatic, autonomous response to the miracles. The egoism, the sacralized, the unitive, the values, as far I can tell now. The plateau experience always has a noetic and cognitive element to it, which is not always true of peak experiences, which can be purely and exclusively emotional. It is much more voluntary than the peak experiences. One can learn to see in this unitive way almost at will. Then it becomes a testimony and appreciation, what we might call a serene cognitive bliss. Meditation is a practice in which an individual uses a technique such as mindfulness or focusing the mind on a particular object, thought or activity, to train attention and awareness and achieve a mentally clear and emotionally calm and stable state. Meditation is practiced in various religious traditions. The earliest records of meditation are found in the ancient India text known as the Vedas, and meditation plays a prominent role in the contemplative repertoire of Hinduism and Buddhism. Since the 19th century, Asian meditation techniques have spread to other cultures, where they have also found application in non-spiritual contexts such as business and health. Meditation can significantly reduce stress, anxiety, depression, and pain, and improve peace, insight, self-concept, and well-being. Research is ongoing to better understand the effects of meditation on psychological, neurological, and cardiovascular health, among other areas. Out-of-body experience. Within the altered states of consciousness is the out-of-body experience, which is the sensation of floating in the air projected outside the body. In some cases, the subject may experience autoscopy, or the possibility of seeing one's own body from the point of view of an external observer, or even be able to project other places. Astral projection or astral splitting is a type of subjective experience by which many people claim to have experienced a separation, a splitting of what they call the astral body or subtle body from the physical body. The same phenomenon receives several different names, among which are astral splitting, astral projection, astral travel, body splitting, projection of the consciousness, among others. There is also exteriorization, which is a state of consciousness liberated when the soul is permanently installed 1 meter behind the head, as Ron Hubbard explained, which produces an expansion of the self and liberates from suffering, which is represented in the halo of the saints. But this is different from astral projection. Human potential. The human potential movement was born in the heart of counterculture in the United States in the 60s, and is based around the idea that the psychological and spiritual resources of the higher state of consciousness, or those presented in transcendent experiences, are little or not at all exploited by human beings. In other words, there are multiple interactions between body and spirit, and individuals generally pay little attention to them, so this potential is wasted. Through this development, individual life could be greatly enriched by making people more creative and happier, by achieving a better quality of life, and by promoting positive social changes based on the improvement of human interrelationships. The term self-actualization has been used in different theories of psychology with different meanings. It was originally introduced by Kurt Goldstein to refer to the realization of the individual's own potential, the expression of one's creativity, the search for spiritual enlightenment, the pursuit of knowledge, and the desire to serve society are examples of self-realization. From Goldstein's point of view, this is the organism's primary motive, the only real motive. The tendency to realize oneself as much as possible is the basic drive. The drive for self-realization is the true motivation. Perennial philosophy. According to perennial philosophy, a term coined by Leibniz, mystical experiences in all religions are essentially the same. It assumes that many, if not all, of the world's great religions have arisen around the teaching of mystics, including Buddha, Jesus, Lao Tse, and Krishna. It also sees most religious traditions describing the fundamental mystical experience, at least esoterically. The term was popularized in the middle 20th century by Aldous Huxley, who was deeply influenced by the new Vedanta and universalism of Swami Vivekananda, a disciple of Ramakrishna, belonged to a branch of Vedanta that holds that no one can be truly free until we all are. Even the desire for personal salvation must therefore be subordinated to the tireless work for the salvation of others, which is the true mark of enlightenment and the concept of the enlightened person. In his 1945 book, The Perennial Philosophy, Huxley defined the perennial philosophy as the metaphysics that recognizes a divine reality substantial to the world of things, lives, and minds. The psychology that finds in the soul something similar or even identical to the divine reality. The ethics that places the ultimate end of man in the knowledge of the immanent and transcendent foundation of all being. The thing is immemorial and universal. Swami Vivekananda. Sri Aurobindo considered Vivekananda as his spiritual mentor and said, Vivekananda was an impetuous soul like no other, a lion among men, but the works he bequeathed to us are immeasurable to our impression of his creative power and energy. We perceive his influence still acting as a gigantic way without quite knowing how or where, in something as yet unformed, something leonine, great, intuitive, ennobling, which has entered into the soul of India. J. H. Wright, professor of Greek at Harvard University, encouraged Vivekananda to represent Hinduism at the 1893 Chicago World Parliament of Religions, when the Swami expressed reservations, saying he has no credentials. The professor replied, "Asking you for credentials, Swami, is like asking the sun about its right to shine." He wrote a letter recommending Vivekananda to the chairman of the delegate selection committee, saying, "This man knows more than all our learned professors put together." Vivekananda was well received at the World Parliament of Religions in Chicago, where he gave a series of lectures. The audience rose from their seats and offered him a 2-minute warm round of applause as he began his address with the famous words, "Sisters and brothers of the West." When the applause ended, the Swami began his speech by thanking the young nation on behalf of the oldest monastic order in the world, the Vedantic order of sannyasis, renounced monks. One newspaper described him as an orator by divine right and undoubtedly the greatest figure in Parliament. Vivekananda's arrival in the US has been identified by many as the beginning of Western interest in Hinduism, not as something exotic, Eastern singularity, but as a vital religious and philosophical tradition which may indeed have something important to contribute to the West. Swami Vivekananda addressed the World Parliament of Religions, held in conjunction with the World Columbian Exposition. Its unprecedented success opened the way for dialogue between the religions of East and West. There was a small incident during the Vivekananda's visit. An American lady, impressed by the Swami's thoughts, approached him and said, in quotes, "I need a son from you, one who is exactly like you." To which Swami Vivekananda replied, "You don't need a son like me, mother. I myself will be your son." This is very emotive. Direct experience. On the other hand, Paramahansa Yogananda was an Hindu yogi and guru, a precursor of yoga in the West, particularly of the method called Kriya Yoga. He introduced many people to the teachings of meditation, and many were introduced to instant philosophy for the first time in his famous book Self-Biography of a Yogi, or Autobiography. Yogananda taught his disciples the necessity of direct experience of truth as opposed to blind faith. He said that the true basis of religion is not faith, but intuitive experience. Intuition is the soul's capacity to know God. To know what religion really is, one must know God. It's not a matter of belief, but of experience. That is why he didn't speak of believing, but of feeling and breathing God, and experiencing how his energy ascends through the spine until it illuminates the last chakra, which is the halo of the saints. Repeating traditional Hindu teachings, he taught that the entire universe is a movie of God, and that individuals are simply actors in this divine drama, changing roles in each reincarnation. He taught that the deep suffering of humankind comes from identifying too much with the current body and place of birth, instead of identifying with the producer of the movie, who is the creator. Self-realization is the integral and experiential knowledge that the body, mind, and soul possess the capacity to experience union with the Absolute. For the divine omnipresence is also within us, in latent form, and all we need is to improve our knowledge. Yogananda learned Kriya Yoga through his lineage of teachers. Sri Yukteswar, who was a disciple of Lahiri Mahasaya, who in turn was a disciple of Mahavatar Babaji. Conditions. According to Aldous Huxley, to apprehend the divine reality, one must choose to fulfill certain conditions: to become loving, pure in heart, and poor in spirit. Huxley maintains that the very few people that can attain this state, that there are very few people, those who have fulfilled these conditions, grasped universal truth, and interpreted it, have generally received the name of saint, prophet, sage, or enlightened one. Huxley argues that those who have modified their merely human mode of being, and have thus been able to comprehend more than the merely humankind and amount of knowledge, have also attained this enlightenment state. The rudiments of the perennial philosophy can be found among the traditional wisdom of primitive peoples in all regions of the world, and in its fully developed forms it has a place in each of the higher religions. William James popularized the use of the term religious experience in his work The Varieties of Religious Experience. Writers such as W.T. Stace, Huston Smith, and Robert Foreman argue that there are basic similarities in mystical experience in all religions, cultures, and ages. Basic principles. The perennial philosophy is expressed more succinctly in the Sanskrit formula Tattvam Asi. Thou art that, or that are you. The Atman, or the immanent eternal self, is one with Brahman, the absolute principle of all existence, and the ultimate end of every human being is to discover the fact for himself, to discover who he really is. In Huxley's 1944 essay in Vedanta and the West, he describes the minimal working hypothesis, the basic outline of the perennial philosophy found in all the mystical branches of the world's religions. First, that there is a deity or foundation which is the unmanifested principle of all manifestation. Second, that the foundation is transcendent and immanent. Third, that it is possible for human beings to love, know, and virtually really identified with the ground. Fourth, that to attain this intuitive, this unitive knowledge, to realize this supreme identity, is the final end and purpose of human existence. Fifth, that there is a law of Dhamma which must be obeyed, a Tao or way which must be followed, if human beings are to attain their ultimate goal. Religious pluralism. Religious pluralism holds that the various religions of the world are limited by their different historical and cultural context, and that therefore there is no one true religion. There are only many equally valid or invalid religions. Each religion is the direct result of humankind's attempt to grasp and understand the incomprehensible divine reality, which surpasses all the artificial religions of the world. Therefore, each religion has an authentic but ultimately inadequate perception of the divine reality, producing a partial understanding of the universal truth, which requires synthesis to achieve a complete understanding, as well as a personal path to spiritual enlightenment. The Perennial Philosophy affirms that it is the divine reality that allows us to understand the universal truth. Each religion provides its own interpretation of universal truth, based on its historical and cultural context, potentially providing all that is necessary to observe the divine reality and reach a state where universal truth can be confirmed and salvation or spiritual enlightenment achieved. The new spiritual philosophy of the Aquarian Age aims to create a spirituality without boundaries or limiting dogmas that is inclusive and pluralistic, not to be confused with the New Age movement. It holds a holistic worldview, emphasizing that mind, body, and spirit are interrelated, and that there is a form of monism and unity throughout the universe. It attempts to create a worldview that includes both science and spirituality, and embraces a number of forms of mainstream science, as well as other forms of science that are now considered marginal, but will be very important in the future of humankind. And that's all for today. Thanks a lot for listening, friends.